Emily Foster wanted freedom. Sherry Parks needed a friend. Alex Foster never saw it coming. In a twisted plan that fooled everyone, Emily faked her own death, planted Sherry's body in her place, and vanished, leaving Alex to face a storm of lies and financial crimes she uncovered before disappearing forever. This is the shocking true crime story of how a perfect wife turned into a ghost while the world believed she was dead. Emily Foster's world appeared peaceful to anyone looking in from the outside. In the suburban streets lined with trimmed lawns and American flags waving from porches, she was the type of wife neighbors praised. She brought brownies to block parties, always remembered birthdays, and waved politely when walking her dog each morning before the sun rose. On social media, she posted smiling pictures next to Alex, their golden retriever, sitting between them, sunsets layered in the background, as if her life were a catalog of quiet joy. She planned charity bake sales for the local library, took yoga classes with the other wives on Saturdays, and never missed her monthly appointments to maintain her soft, honey brown hair, which framed her calm face perfectly in every photograph. The grocery store clerks knew her by name, and people often told Alex he was lucky to have her. But Emily had begun to feel as if she were living inside a glass jar, tapping gently from within, unheard and unseen, smiling while feeling the air thin around her. A teen night, when Alex fell asleep on the couch with the TV humming, Emily would quietly close the bedroom door and take out her laptop. She scrolled for hours through missing persons forums, reading the stories of women who vanished, women who walked away from lives they no longer recognize, women who erased themselves without a trace. She noted the police mistakes, the family regrets, and how the world seemed to move on so quickly when the person was believed to be dead. A seed grew inside Emily each night as she read these stories, a vision of herself not trapped in these same suburban streets, not living on repeat, not tied to a husband who didn't see the growing fear in her eyes each morning when she woke up to another day that felt exactly the same. The idea started small, like a whisper she tried to ignore while she folded laundry, cooked dinner, and checked off grocery lists, but it grew louder each time she saw herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman who smiled back. She began making lists in a small notebook she kept hidden under a loose floorboard in her closet. Lists of what she would need to disappear, how to withdraw cash without raising suspicion, how to cover her tracks on credit cards, which states had the slowest response times for missing persons cases. She learned about dental records, how bodies were identified, how a body could be staged to be unrecognizable while still appearing identifiable enough to close a case quickly. Emily also learned that the world saw a body and wanted closure, not questions. That was how she planned to leave, not with a messy divorce, not with a police report or a missing persons flyer, but with the death that no one would question, a death that would bury her old life for good. She watched Alex sleep, his face soft, in the blue glow of the television, and felt nothing, no love, no hatred, only a quiet emptiness. Her heart had hardened so slowly she hadn't noticed it happening, but now she could feel the cold certainty in each breath. She would not be like the women she read about, who ran and were found, who ran and were pulled back into lives they tried to leave. She would be the woman who vanished and stayed gone, the woman who became a story no one could ever fully explain, the woman who would bury herself, walk away, and never look back, while everyone believed she was gone forever. Emily's obsession with disappearing turned into precision planning once she discovered Sherry Parks. Sherry was everything Emily needed in a doppelganger: similar height, similar build, The same shade of brown hair, and the kind of overlooked presence that left no lasting memory in the minds of strangers. Emily first noticed her outside a bus station while pretending to wait for a friend, watching the way Sherry lingered near vending machines, collecting leftover coins and half-eaten sandwiches people tossed away. She wore a large, faded jacket that nearly swallowed her frame and kept her head down, eyes darting, only to scan for the next moment of safety. Emily felt an unsettling recognition in that posture, as if she were looking at a ghost of herself. If her life had taken a slightly different turn, instead of fear, Emily felt a rare calm while watching Sherry, a confirmation that her plan could truly work. She began to shadow Sherry for days, noting her routines, where she slept near the edge of the park, how she often visited the church on the corner for free meals, and how she left quickly before anyone could ask questions. Emily learned that Sherry avoided shelters, preferring the risk of the streets to the rules of crowded bunks, and it made her easier to approach without drawing attention. She saw how people pretended not to see Sherry, how their eyes slid past her as if she were air. It was the final piece Emily needed, someone whose disappearance would ripple outward barely at all, letting Emily step into the void she left behind. It began with small gestures. Emily brought coffee in a paper cup, leaving it a few feet from Sherry's spot before walking away. She dropped off a sandwich one afternoon, sitting on a nearby bench, pretending to scroll through her phone, watching as Sherry approached the offering with caution before taking it. Emily began leaving notes with the food, small phrases like, "For you, stay warm," to create a sense of gentle trust, a ghostly kindness from a stranger that would not frighten Sherry away. Over time, Emily started to appear at the church meals, blending in, watching Sherry from across the room, smiling softly if their eyes met, building familiarity without forcing conversation. She wore clothes different from her suburban self, changed her hairstyle, and never used her real name, introducing herself as Mia, a volunteer who had fallen on hard times too. It took weeks before Sherry finally accepted a seat beside her at one of the tables, slowly eating the warm food while Emily spoke in a soft voice about how hard life could be, about needing to find a way out. Sherry's guard lowered each time Emily shared small stories that were just close enough to her real life to sound truthful, weaving a connection that felt real even to Emily at times. In those quiet moments, Emily learned about Sherry's life, how she grew up in foster care, how she never knew her parents, how she sometimes missed her own reflection when she could find a bathroom mirror, just to remember she was still there. Emily kept every detail, every phrase, locked in her mind, noting the small scar on Sherry's neck, the chipped tooth when she smiled, the slight limp in her walk, all the things that would later help her convince the world that Sherry was Emily. She knew the exact timing she needed, the day she would lure Sherry somewhere quiet, the way she would stage the scene, the exact clothes Sherry would wear, and how Emily's own belongings would be placed on her to complete the illusion. As she sat with Sherry on that cold bench, sharing a single cup of coffee, Emily did not feel guilt. She felt the walls of her planned freedom tightening around her, becoming solid, becoming real. Sherry was the answer, the final step toward a life where Emily could be truly free, and nothing, not even the flicker of guilt in her chest, would stop her from taking it. It was a gray morning when the call came in, a complaint about a strange smell coming from an abandoned car near the quiet cul-de-sac where Emily and Alex lived. A neighbor walking her dog noticed the car, parked crooked along the curb, frost on the windows, despite the engine's silence. The smell was sharp enough that she covered her mouth and stepped back, her dog whining at the edge of the grass. She called the police, reporting what she thought was a dead animal in the trunk. When officers arrived, the street was still, lined with trimmed hedges and carefully swept driveways. The only sound the crackle of radios as the officers circled the vehicle. Inside the car, they found a burned body slumped in the driver's seat, charred and shrunken, with the seatbelt melted into the fabric of the clothing that once clung to it. The air was thick, the smoke scent still lingering, leaving the officers turning away, eyes watering, as they worked to secure the scene. The license plate led them straight to Alex Foster's address. Just a few houses down the street, the front door painted blue, with a small wreath hanging neatly at the center. Alex opened the door, still in his work clothes, confusion settling into panic as the officers asked him to come with them to identify the vehicle. His confusion turned to horror when he saw the car, the small scratches on the back bumper. He recognized the shattered taillight he never got around to fixing, and the sight of Emily's purse found on the passenger seat, melted but still recognizable by the metal clasp she loved. The investigators moved quickly, taking statements, checking the scene, and examining the remains. It didn't take long before they found Emily's wedding ring fused to the charred remains of a finger, her ID among the burned fragments of her wallet, and strands of hair that appeared to match Emily's shade, found near the headrest, singed, but present. The official narrative was formed quickly. Emily Foster had taken her own life. They said the signs were clear, even if Alex insisted she had seemed fine, that she had smiled the night before, that they had plans to visit her parents that weekend. But in quiet meetings behind closed doors, investigators shared nods of understanding. Speaking of hidden depression and private struggles, it was easier to close the file than to question what they saw. The neighborhood was draped in hushed mourning. Neighbors left casseroles on Alex's doorstep, whispering about how tragedy strikes without warning, how no one truly knows what happens inside a marriage. A funeral was held within the week, the casket sealed, a framed photograph of Emily placed on a table surrounded by pale flowers, while Alex's hands shook as he greeted family and friends. Emily's mother wept softly in the front row, clutching a folded handkerchief, her sobs echoing in the small chapel as the pastor spoke of peace and forgiveness. But far away, in a small motel room with peeling wallpaper, Emily watched the live-streamed funeral on a burner phone balanced on her knees. Her hair dyed a darker brown, cut short enough that she barely recognized herself in the reflection of the motel window. She had already emptied her bank account in small withdrawals, using it to buy forged documents and a bus ticket out of state. She turned off the stream just as the casket was lowered, the cries of her family fading into silence as she slid the phone into her bag, zipped it shut, and stood up. Her body was officially dead, her old life buried and mourned by those who believed the ashes belonged to her. She felt nothing as she stepped out into the cold morning air, the fog wrapping around her like a promise, leaving behind everything that had ever tried to keep her in a life she never chose. Emily sat in a small, rented room above a diner in a distant town, the thin walls humming with the sound of the refrigerator and the clatter of dishes downstairs. She had become someone else now, a woman with short, dark hair and a new name, quietly folding napkins for the early morning breakfast rush while customers chatted over coffee, unaware that the woman refilling their cups was supposed to be dead. She moved carefully, never staying too long in one place, keeping her head down while she memorized the exits of every building she entered, carrying cash tucked in the lining of her worn jacket. At night, she sat by the window looking out at the empty streetlights, remembering her old life, only as a distant echo, a story she had read somewhere about a woman who burned away her past and vanished. But Emily was not simply running from a suffocating marriage or the dull routines of a life she never wanted. She had discovered Alex's secrets long before she planned her escape. One rainy evening, while sorting through the mail, she found statements hidden in the back of the drawer. Documents that tied her name to debts she never signed for, loans taken under her identity, false signatures that matched hers almost perfectly. The small construction business Alex ran was a front for laundering money, and Emily was listed on every paper, every fraudulent account, every signature on hidden contracts that would trace back to her. When the time came, Emily saw the way Alex lived just slightly above their means, the quiet purchases he made that never appeared in the visible bank statements, the excuses about long work hours while he moved money through accounts she never knew existed. At first, she felt fear, the kind that clenched around her ribs, making it hard to breathe while she lay awake at night, realizing she was trapped in a cage built by her own husband. Then the fear shifted into something harder, sharper, as she understood the danger of staying. If Alex was caught, she would be dragged down with him, her name stained, her freedom gone, blamed for crimes she never committed, but could never fully prove she had not enabled. She saw the future in clear, brutal detail: courtrooms, handcuffs, her parents watching in shock as headlines called her a criminal, years stolen in a cold cell, while Alex claimed innocence, insisting they had done it together. Faking her death was not just a way to disappear, it was the only way to break free from the mess Alex created, to walk away before the collapse. She needed to be gone, truly gone, for the plan to work. She needed Alex to believe she was dead, so he would continue making mistakes, forcing the investigators to look only at him when the financial collapse arrived. In the weeks after her staged death, Emily used a burner phone to send anonymous tips to local authorities, pointing them to the hidden accounts and inconsistencies she discovered, letting the pieces unravel slowly while she sipped coffee in diners where no one knew her name. She watched the headlines appear on small local news sites. Local business owner under investigation for fraud. She saw Alex's face in the background of a news clip, looking exhausted and hollow as police arrived at his door. Emily felt nothing as she shut off the screen, sliding the burner phone into a plastic bag and tossing it into the dumpster behind the diner. She stood in the cold air for a moment, breathing in the freedom that came with each small step away from the life that tried to swallow her. Alex was left to face the chaos he created, and Emily, under a new name, felt her past burning away with each mile she placed between herself and the grave the world believed she was resting in. Months passed, and the story of Emily Foster's tragic death began to fade in the town she left behind, replaced by newer tragedies, gossip about neighbors, and the slow forgetting that always comes after funerals. Alex, meanwhile, found himself trapped in the chaos Emily had prepared for him. Investigators who once offered sympathetic nods during Emily's funeral now returned to his doorstep with clipped questions about hidden accounts and signatures that matched Emily's handwriting to perfectly, asking about transactions tied to his failing construction business, the missing funds, the debts he claimed he knew nothing about. Alex's protests fell on cold ears, and neighbors who once brought casseroles now watched from their windows as unmarked cars parked outside his house, whispering behind curtains about how quickly a man could fall apart. Emily kept track of the investigation through library computers in different towns, using fake names to log onto public machines, reading every article about Alex's slow downfall. She watched as his face changed in each photo captured by the press, his eyes darker, his clothes more wrinkled, the weight of his secrets finally crashing down on him in public view. She read how people speculated about how his wife's death broke him, how the grief pushed him into making reckless financial decisions, never realizing that Emily herself had sent the tips that uncovered his lies, ensuring his crimes would not be hidden once she was gone. But as the investigation deepened, a detective named Carla refused to let go of the small details at the edges of Emily's staged death. Carla had joined the case late, assigned to review cold files and overlook discrepancies. She noticed the scar on the burned body did not match the exact placement of Emily's childhood injury noted in medical records, a single inch of difference that others had missed. She studied the autopsy photos closely, noticing the missing dental filling. Emily's records had a detail burned away, but not enough to erase doubt. Carla pulled threads carefully, checking missing persons reports in the months before Emily's death, cross-referencing women with similar builds and hair color. That was how Sherry Park's name surfaced. A woman no one claimed, reported missing by a shelter worker who filed a report that was quickly buried and forgotten. Carla quietly reopened the case, collecting pieces while the public still believed Emily was gone forever. She started tracking small purchases tied to Emily's old accounts before they were closed, minor transactions for cheap meals and bus tickets that hinted someone was living just under the radar. Carla followed the trail patiently, watching the maps light up with patterns, noting the places Emily had stayed, the towns she passed through, the motels she left in the middle of the night. The detective saw the story behind the ashes, the careful replacement of Emily with Sherry, the way Emily buried herself to escape her marriage and leave Alex to drown in his crimes alone. When news finally broke, it became a national obsession. Wife fakes her death, frames husband in financial scandal. Podcasts dissected every detail. Internet forums lit up with theories, and amateur sleuths praised Emily as either a cold mastermind or a survivor seeking freedom. But Emily had already moved again, leaving the small town before the reporters arrived, changing her hair color once more, learning a new name, and finding a cheap room in a distant place where no one asked questions. She watched the world argue about her choices, but Emily didn't care. She walked quiet streets in the dawn, free in a way she never was before, each breath a quiet victory, as the life she had left behind turned into a story no one could fully prove, a ghost in a world that believed she was dead, while Emily continued to live, unbound, unclaimed, and untouchable.